Okay, hi guys. Let me stop sharing the screen, and before Ethan actually introduce L to all of you, I think perhaps everyone can just let us know where are you guys coming from. I'm seeing people from Thailand and a few countries. Maybe we can just chit chat for another 2 minutes before we officially start. Hi from India. Hello. Hi, Zakaria. Ethan, you are muted. I think you are trying to speak.
Yeah, I say that's Jason from Charlotte, North Carolina, and that was like 9 a.m. or something like that. And I thought there would be a lot more Asian audience compared to the US audience because of time zone and stuff like that. It's not easy for Al to wake up at 6 a.m. and certainly not easy for guys to join at 9 a.m. as well. So hello from India, hello from Istanbul, hello from Philippines, Singapore. Wow, guess how many nationality do we have in the audiences? Yeah, that's Malaysia.
Malaysia. Hi. There's 2 Malaysian representatives over here.
So it's 9:03. We are about to start. So let me introduce myself. My name is Ethan Su. I am the regional partner for Scrum Inc. Now, this is the Move Forward Asia conference. In this conference, we are trying to bring the best mind for Agile at Scale to come to this conference and tell us why is their school of knowledge relevant in today's 2021 landscape, right? So this is a series of events. We have 3 very, very high profile speakers. There's Alan Shalloway here today, and tomorrow we have Jack Street, and on the 3rd day we have Anne Spence. So I think Al is going to talk a little bit about discipline, Agile, and Flex. Al is currently designing the Agile movement for PMI. So if you are coming here to look into the future of PMI and what's upcoming for the PMI organization, and if you are PMP, you wonder about what can you do next. Al will be a great guy because he will be designing things and you will be enjoying the things that's he designed. I think what Al's design is going to roll out to worldwide pretty soon. So for myself, being the regional partner of Scrum Inc, I am working with Dr. Jeff Sutherland. Jeff is asking me to help finding the next generation Scrum trainer in the Asia Pacific. So I am to find the trainers. I am to coach them and mentor them so that they can be a certified Scrum trainer by Scrum Inc. So if you are a senior Agile practitioner, if you're an Agile coach, and if you want to be a certified Scrum trainer by Scrum Inc, I am the right person to talk to. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. My name is Ethan Su. Look for me, look for our company, CI Agile. Now, Alan, I have known Alan for a long time. We haven't spoken for quite a while, but the first time I get to know Alan was that I flew to Seattle and I have a chat with Al. So that was a time when I was puzzling, and I was a junior consultant at that time. I was like 2 or 3 years of Agile consulting experience. I was thinking about learning Kanban then. So I flew from Shanghai to Chicago to take a course from LKU to try to learn about Kanban. And only later I realized that Al was one of the original founder of LKU along with David Anderson. Obviously, after that, Al depart and then have his own things. So, and then there was a time when I was learning Kanban and hearing things like the new practices like ATDD and things like that. And it happened that I run into Al and he's an expert in this. That's how we get to know each other. After that, we seldom speak. Al, later only that I realized Al become the director at PMI. All right. So Al is a very senior practitioner. I read his book. I think there are a lot of good idea from the lean world that Al is going to give it to us. So without further ado, Al, please take it away.
Thanks. Thanks, Ethan. Yeah, it's good to be here. And I think this will be a very interesting talk. I put this together for this presentation. So this is the first time I've delivered it, but all the pieces are there. So as you can tell from the books and just what's there, I've been around a lot. Started Net Objectives back in '99 and was acquired by the PMI in 2019, mostly on the basis of Flex, actually, which I'll be talking about. That's the approach we take. It's not a framework. It's more of a mindset and a thought process and a set of tools you can use. And we've refined it over the last year and a half, and it's in a pilot mode now, but it'll be coming available in actually later this month with certification available in June, just a little lagging on the certification exams. It actually is a culmination of the work we did at Scale in Net Objectives from basically 2005 to 2019 when we were acquired. And I have to laugh a little bit. Agile at Scale in 2005 was 3 Scrum teams. But even back then, we didn't know how to do that quite well. And the Lean Agile Software Development book that's in the middle there was based on the work we did from 2005 to about 2008. And then Guy Beaver and I wrote it. We came up with some fairly innovative things that have become somewhat the standard too, in small team, small multiple team, and some large team. There's actually some things I'll be presenting today with different names, but actually go back to that book over a decade. I don't necessarily recommend it now. It's a bit aged compared to things we've learned. I want to talk about what the basis of Disciplined Agile Flex is. And you won't hear me talk about Disciplined Agile after this probably, except a little bit. And the reason is because Disciplined Agile is unlike really any other method out there, with the possible exception of Steve Tenden's Team Flow, which I highly recommend, by the way. He has got a great book. His is a blend of flow, lean, theory, constraints. Steve's a very smart guy. But the thing that's unique about, I think, the two of our approaches is, and we're compatible but different, but the thing we both do is we look to see what's the job that needs to be done, and then we come from that. We don't have rather a solution we packaged and then try to see how to fit the problem. Where actually the first step is, what is somebody who's trying to improve a organization? What do they need to know? This is called the job task analysis. In other words, we're coming from what's the problem? And in my mind, the problem is we're not getting delivery of software or non-software work. Flex is for both. I sometimes fall back into the old IT world, which I kind of came from, but we're moving it more and more with examples into non-IT because it all works fine, whether it's IT or not. But what's the job task analysis? What do you need to do to get the job done? That's the first step. That's where you have to start. You don't start with a prepackaged solution. You start with understanding what your goal is, what your challenge is, and then how you can get to it. The second thing, though, is you need a system that'll support that. That's what Flex is, Flow for Enterprise Transformation. It's just a marketing name. I mean, it basically, the system is what helps you do what's at the top. And then, of course, well, you need a workshop or you need some way of letting people know what this is. So the Disciplined Agile Value Stream Consultant workshop is a combination of, I guess, 2 things. It puts a name on the person who knows how to improve an organization using Flex, and it's also the name of the workshop where you learn how to do that. So what I'm going to be describing is not Disciplined Agile Value Stream Consultant workshop per se, and actually, of course, I'll be going through what we do. But what I really want you to think about is that what I'm describing is what you need to do or what people need to do. And it's designed so it can work pretty much everywhere because it's a thought process and how do you apply known principles and practices and an approach to solve things. We're what we call agnostic. We will do what works best. We take a very scientific approach, as you'll see. So before we get into, well, what does DAVSC or what is this job task analysis? We got to really understand what our problem is. So In some ways, it comes from the way we organize our companies. So most companies have some sort of hierarchy with siloing in it, and there's an interesting phenomenon that happens when you do this is when you organize like this, management will naturally look to see if people are being properly utilized, are they productive, are they doing quality work, are they working on the right things? And you might be thinking, well, duh, of course, that's what they're doing. But this actually points out something else to be observed, which is that system structure informs behavior or creates behavior. This is very important to understand because what it means is if we're having some challenges in the behavior we're having, we want something else to take place. We really need to look at the system. We need to understand what's going on because that's probably where the challenges are lying. The nature of our work, however, doesn't work that way. It comes from the customer. We might get approval at times. It cuts across the organization. And this linear approach is a misnomer. It really, of course, goes all over the place, but I'm just trying to be illustrative. But this also causes a lot of overlap. So product managers in general get into conflicts because you actually have quite a few of these things going on. So what do? You've got this conflict of things running through the organization. And this, I would suggest, is our inherent problem in most companies. We manage people one way and our work goes another way. Okay, just take a moment to reflect on that. How many times you've tried to get something done, and what happens is this conflict of how we manage people versus how we manage the workflow. In fact, most people aren't even managing the workflow. This is why we have to have this shift from managing people. We don't need to manage people. We should trust that they're going to get the job done. We need to create an environment within which they work. So we find that we're busy managing people, not managing the value. So we really aren't watching. It's like driving, but looking backwards or looking to the side, but not looking on the real thing we need to look at, which is how are we getting value done? Now, of course, we're trying to do it, but we do it in an indirect, independent way, not directly looking at the work that's there. So I would suggest this is one of our problems. Now, if you look at that workflow, this is the value stream, okay? The value stream is the workflow going through an organization, and you have several of them because each product will have its own value stream. And in fact, one of the problems we have is that people are often in multiple value streams. And I'll just put an aside here. SAFe at times in their online documentation and their workshops makes it sound like the value stream is the people. It isn't. It gets confusing when you do that because then you start looking at the people. We want to look at the work. So we talk about stable value streams. Well, we want some stability, but it's really the focus must be on the flow of value across the organization. And if you see somebody's in multiple value streams, that's actually a challenge. They're going to be task switching. They're going to be pulled in different directions. So we want to attend to that. Value streams are a set of actions that take place to add value to a customer from the initial request through the realization of value by the customer. Always begins and ends with a customer. By the way, beginning and ending with a customer doesn't mean the customer said it, but it's on their behalf. And the customer, of course, can be internal or external. Okay. Again, it's the work, not the people. There's another reason for this. One of the things that Lean tells us, and a lot of people still identify Lean with Lean Six Sigma or Lean manufacturing, but I'm referring to Lean as underneath what makes Lean manufacturing work, underneath what makes Lean Six Sigma work are some principles. You know a few of them already. You've probably heard just in time. That's talking about removing delays, or stop the line when there's a quality problem, means build quality in. If you go down deep enough and look at what are the principles driving Lean thinking, that's what we're talking about. And it is a focus on the work, not on the individuals. Improve the environment within which people work. The individuals will get better work done. That's a basic tenet of it. So here's an interesting thing. If you focus on the work, see, if you focus on the people, you're going to see everybody's busy. I won't say some people don't find a way to not be busy, but mostly in organizations, people are busy. They're over busy. But the work is another issue. It comes in and it waits for approval. Then it goes somebody, and then they have to wait till the next person's available. And in fact, work waits more often than not at a place. In fact, if you're working on 3 things, 2 of those 3 are waiting, which means most of the time the work is waiting if you have multiple things going on. This is another of the big problems. The question is, what percentage of the time is the work moving forward? And the problem part of it is, you're waiting for something to be done, but how would you know? Most people don't measure this. They measure how people are busy, how much they're working, how productive they are. They will say, well, we started here and we ended there, and it took us 3 months to get it done. Yeah, but over that 3 months, if you actually did a value stream map to see when you were working on it and when you weren't, value stream mapping is looking to see all these steps, you'd find that in most organizations, the work is waiting well over, an amazing amount of time. Even when people are doing Scrum, if they don't have some overall reaching thing, it waits probably for 80% of the time, 4 out of 5 times that it's just sitting there. Okay, no one's managing this in most places. So instead of managing people, we have to shift our focus from the utilization of people to throughput. How fast are things getting through the system? We also have to make sure each team's work is visible upstream and that our work is visible downstream. In other words, we need to collaborate, not just with the team we're in, but the teams that we're working with to get value out the door, okay? So our ecosystem and the visibility of work in it is very, very critical. Okay, so, well, I might have started with this part, actually, of business agility. Just realized I'm not, just give me 1 second. I'm going to answer, I should have said this too, I'm going to hold about 10 or 15 minutes extra for questions at the end. And I just want to make sure I had the chat up. If there's something, you can post them anytime, but I won't get to them till the end. So could have started with this when I said we're trying to improve. I'll give a name of it now. Our objective is really business agility, okay? And what does business agility mean? It's the ability to realize highest business value in a shorter amount of time, consistently, sustainably, and with high quality. Now, business value typically is going to be adding value to our customers, but it could be improving our ability to add value to our customers. So it's got a dual meaning. How do we, so to speak, sharpen the saw, and how do we use the saw to get value? So we want this to be something that we can do in a sustainable and quick manner. One of the interesting things about Lean is it tells us not to focus on going faster. We want to remove delays. If you think about it, this makes a lot of sense because it's easier to remove the delays in the workflow than it is to go faster in coding or marketing or things of that nature. Going faster in your activities may cause errors, but removing delays is actually a free win if you can figure out how to do it. So there are a few Lean principles we do want to be aware of. Okay, tend to delays in the workflow, interactions in the value stream. We want to remove delays, make everything visible. We want to have a good workflow. Now, you probably heard a lot of mantras in Lean saying, oh, it's about eliminating waste. And there's truth to that, but you'll notice I'm actually talking about delays in workflow. And the reason for that is if you're in a manufacturing environment and you can see the parts coming in and you can see when they have errors and you can see the steps in between them, then to say eliminate waste is fine because you can see the waste. If you're in IT, however, you actually can't see the waste. You don't see the software as it's being built. There's no bumper to fall off or something of that nature. Now, in IT work, you can say, well, then why don't I just call it eliminate waste in non-IT work, in physical work? And the reason is even there, the delays are often what's very important, more important than the error that was made. The errors actually cause a lot of the waste because we make errors, we don't see it. Delays rather cause waste because we don't see what's going on. So removing delays of any kind, removing delays in the workflow, making things visible, that provides us feedback and we can see what's happening. So value stream management is a way to achieve business agility. This means managing the value stream, managing the workflow, improving the structure of it. We have to look at the entire value stream. Think of a hose and think of the starting part of the hose, call that call that portfolio management, call it product management. And then as you get into the middle part of the hose, you get the development group, or if it's a project in the physical world, the project team that's getting it done. And then it gets down to operations and marketing, and it comes out. So you've got this long hose and you've got all these labels. But I would say any place that that hose gets blocked, it blocks the whole hose. So you've got to look at the entire thing. People often talk about, well, should we start at the bottom or should we start at the top? I would suggest that's not a good way of looking at things. See, that's the old school way of looking at it as a hierarchy, that there is a top, like we put portfolio at the top and product just underneath it. And then, mid-management, then we have the teams. That's because that's hierarchical thinking of how we control. That's thinking in terms of management. We want to think in terms of the hose, the value stream. There's the front end, there's the back end. Where do we start? Well, maybe at the back end, if that's where it's blocked. Maybe at the front end, if we're putting bad things into the hose. Maybe in the middle. Maybe the whole value stream needs to be started with. So we need to attend to this and know this is a way to approach it. Now, that being said, we always want to do small delivery increments because that tends to work better. Okay. Business agility by doing things quickly will actually lower risk, create a good environment, lowers risk because we can see what we're doing. Okay. I'm just going to do a really quick view. This is actually very important, but getting systems thinking done in more than a couple of minutes is really difficult. But it's the way of looking at the entire organization, how one thing affects something else. It's like if you look at an airplane and you say, what part of the airplane flies? What's the result? Excuse me. What part of the airplane is responsible for flight? Well, it's not just the engines. It's not just the wings. It's not just the fuselage. It's the whole thing working together. Systems work as a whole. If you improve any one part of the airplane without attending to the rest of it, you actually will probably decrease performance. So our local optimizations don't always deliver system-wide improvements. We have to look at it holistically. Okay. Which means, again, when we make changes, we have to look at the entire value stream. How does one thing here affect something there? We find if we push too many things onto the value stream, that actually slows things down. Okay, so let's talk about business agility and an example, because this is actually really important. We have this nature of the work, but we also have what we want to accomplish. Now, this might be a little bit of a little bit novice for some, but I just want to make sure everybody really looks at it this way because it's important. If we have value delivered over time and we look at the old school way, like waterfall, we get requirements completed, we do our design, we do our data layer, we're not getting much value. We're getting some feedback if we're in the right direction, but the value doesn't really happen until we integrate. Now, this is an IT example, but you can, this is often how it's done. If you are building something, well, actually, they don't really build it this way as much as it's thought about. But this is a problem. We call this evolving the system because we're learning more and more about the system that we're building. Okay, now the problem with evolving the system is if you make a mistake and you discover that at the end when you actually deliver it, your value goes to zero. Oh my goodness, we built the wrong thing. So there's a lot of risk to this. It also tends to have requirements be piled on and not be really well prioritized. And it actually encourages this because people get like one chance because they got this big thing they're going to build. So people pile things on because we want to know anything that might be useful. And in fact, it's easier at the beginning to say, I need this because I can just say I need it. I don't have to justify it. I need it. Whereas later, if the product manager didn't get it, they have to justify it. So we encourage people to do this. And that's a bit of a problem. Now, there's another way to go. And this is the essence of agility. The other way to go is that what we do is we say we're going to evolve the business. In other words, we're going to do something that's actually delivers value very quickly. We take a small piece, we identify it, we deliver it, and then we keep doing this. And as time goes on, we might find that we get less and less, so we stop. Okay, we call this evolving the business because we've taken an idea and we're building it in little bits and pieces. Okay. So notice if we make a mistake, because it happens, yeah, I lose value the first time, but then I can course correct. So I shouldn't keep making mistakes. Basically, anytime I I pushed this down because the first release, well, I didn't get any value. Well, actually, I kind of did. I got the feedback that I'm building the wrong thing. So this is quite useful to have that happen. Okay. So this is one of the important things to look at. Now let's look at these two approaches. Let's look at evolving the system and incrementally realizing business value. And let's consider the risk curves here. Now, this is important for two reasons. One reason is you'd like to avoid a lot of risk. But the other reason is a lot of consultants, a lot of project managers, when they're trying to get people to go to better methods and use Agile and try to achieve business agility, sometimes they have troubles talking to the executives to make the decision. And one of the reasons I suggest that happens is because they don't talk in terms of what the executives want to hear. They're not interested in Agile per se, except, oh, I've heard I've got to go Agile. They're interested in reducing risk. They're interested in getting more value. So we want to talk to them about how do you increase value by delivering value sooner, as we did in the business value, and how do we avoid risk? So consider risk. On the left, I would suggest the question is the risk curve, like as time goes on, does it go down just as a gradual line? Does it go down as soon as we start? Does it go down at the end? I would suggest it actually goes down at the end after we deliver something. But the risk curve on the right is as soon as we deliver something, we know if we're somewhat on track or not. The risk goes down a lot. So this is an important realization. There's another aspect to this, which is that reducing batch size, remember we're talking about these small chunks of value, is often all it takes to bring a system back into control. Ellie Goldrat's known for creating theory of constraints, a seminal work called The Goal. He's written another book that I equally recommend. I mean, it's kind of hard to believe anybody could write two books like The Goal, but the other one is called The Choice. And some of the work I do is based on that. What we want to remember is that delivering incrementally, in other words, if I have a 6-month project, we deliver some in a month. We're not delivering less. We're going to deliver all 6 months, but we're doing it incrementally. Okay. This is a reason to deliver sooner. Yeah. Now, somebody said this sounds like agility. What differentiates DAD and Flex? Well, what differentiates DAD and Flex is that we directly address these issues. I'm going to go in and show some of this, but notice that most other things, if you want to look at some of the other systems, actually, again, I'll mention TameFlow, we're going to learn something we call minimum business increments. How do you get these small things? Just saying get small things doesn't actually get them. So people start using the minimum viable product. So in the minimum viable product, it's the smallest piece of work used to validate a hypothesis about a potential product. It's geared towards startups. But see, most people are going to scale aren't actually trying to do MVPs. They might have some. Okay, it's usually built by a small team that can pivot. What do you do when you've actually an established company? There's an enhancement to an existing product. You actually need to have multiple teams. Do you see this is a different situation than an MVP? Trying to use an MVP where this applies is actually MVP misuse. It dilutes the value of the MVP. So what we need is another concept. So this is something that we use that I haven't actually, Sun and Safe, Sun and Last. You can add to it. So there's a lot of stuff you can take here and add to any other existing system, but we call it the minimum business increment. It's the smallest increment we can create for which value can be realized by an internal or external customer. It's not epics, which are too big. They're almost initiatives. It's not a feature because features can't actually be delivered on its own. This one concept actually can revolutionize an agile transformation. So this is one of the big differentiators. The purpose, again, is not doing less. It's about delivering value sooner. And typically it'll take a series of MBIs. Remember, each of those little deliveries that we had is each of those deliveries. Each of these would be an MBI because we're releasing each one of these. So Flex is based on one part is that we're going to have small work items, and these have to be defined as incremental business. And it's something that is actually missing from others. It's something I've been encouraging people to do for over a decade, but for whatever reason, the whole epics feature stories has hung around, and I think has been somewhat problematic. we need to avoid delays, as we talked about, because delays tend to stop value being delivered. But there's an interesting phenomenon. When you get requirements and using them is a long time, or when two groups get out of sync, or between introducing an error, because they, by the way, developers do write bugs. They just talk about it like somebody else put them in, like, oh, I found a bug, like I didn't have anything to do with it. Speaking from personal experience on this one, and then detecting it later. What happens is actually waiting for someone, actually work is created. It's not just multitasking. Multitasking makes us less efficient, but the thing starting and stopping literally creates rework and rethinking about things. So part of the problem with this is that we tend to have management, again, going back to the management approach, that we tend to look at how can I get people busy? I get what we see on the left side of the road. What we really want, and then you can say, well, gee, you know, we're full up. If I'm the director of who's doing projects, and I'll say, look, see, I'm full. What I'll often hear is that, no, here's a spot, here's another spot. We're going for high utilization. Whereas what we want is this throughput, this ability to go through. So one of the things we want to focus on here is, and one of the things that disciplined Agile Flex, we want to bring in what we do. I'm talking about more what needs to happen, is we specifically talk about, let's not worry about utilization. Let's worry about removing the delays. We're trying to get that throughput. We're going to have fewer things by working on smaller things. And we talk about the management that's required to do it. So we don't talk about a car on the left saying, here, give a motivation on how to go faster. I mean, that's what a lot of things are. Oh yeah, we're going to motivate these cars to go faster on the left. No, we're creating that environment on the right. Now you could say, and I guess a lot of people do, and it is important to make this not just an Agile thing, but this is my whole point too. Disciplined Agile is actually about Agile specifically. It's not about a few practices or a few ideas that are thrown out, but then don't tell you how to create what's on the right. So how management creates things on the right, you can think of that as the value streams. I don't have time to go into this right now because we only got 45, 50 minutes and then questions and answers. But we talk about the 9 factors for effective value streams, you know, small things I've mentioned. Then there's some others coming up as well. How do we avoid delays in the workflow? We have to get our eyes set on how to look at the problems so that we can in fact solve the problems, not look at the framework. Again, Flex is not a framework. Flex are these things we need to attend to. So we have to work on small items. We have to avoid delays in the workflow. But what we also want to do is focus on this value realization and align to things. How do we get everybody working on customer value? These would be the minimum business increments for the multiple teams, and MVPs if we're working on innovative things. So this dual approach of the right tool, so to speak, or in this case, the right artifact for the right job at hand is actually quite critical here. Okay, so the 3 driving things are, how do we work on small items, no delays in the workflow, people aligned to the work. Now, people aligned to the work actually means we've organized properly. One of the common mantras in, like, say, Scrum, and any system based on Scrum, which would include SAFe and LESS and Scrum at Scale and Nexus and all that, they're going to say, oh, what you do is you have cross-functional teams and you combine them. Okay, well, we don't actually do it that way. But let's take a moment why that looks good at the beginning. It looks good because when you have a cross-functional team, a good cross-functional team doing Scrum will probably not have delays in the workflow. You'll get collaboration. You'll avoid handoffs. You'll avoid handbacks when the work comes back from one person to the next. So a team that's doing Scrum well can do a lot of these things. We work on stories, people are aligned to the work, but now consider multiple teams. Multiple teams don't work that way. The dynamics between teams is quite different than the dynamics within the team. So you may not have any delays in the Scrum team, but you have a lot of delays across the teams. And I would suggest the reason this happens is because let's, again, not look at the hierarchy. Let's look at the value stream. By starting toward the back of the value stream with the teams and building them up, that's actually a fundamentally flawed way of doing a design of an approach. You want to look at it holistically. we really want to see what's going in. Notice the difference when a minimum business increment, the smallest thing you could build, comes into the system. Then what you do is all your features become subsets of that. You don't build part of the feature you don't need now. You only build that part that's needed for the MBI. So you have smaller pieces. Plus, everybody knows that whole MBI has to be built in order to be released. So you get automatic alignment. You don't have the delays you have when different people work on different teams. So this attitude informs things, and Discipline Agile Flex gives you practices to do that. The people are aligned to the work because they see what's important. So the experience, basically what we're doing with the value stream, is they're different for different companies, but they're surprisingly similar. So this is where DA has come in and been pretty cool. This is the work I've done at Flex. From, like I say, around 2005 to 2019, I saw some really, really smart consultants work differently about the value stream. But what I noticed is, even though they worked somewhat differently with their own style, they kind of ended up doing the same things. And there was a lot of similarity to what there are. Some companies have additional constraints, such as specialized hardware or pharmaceutical requirements. But more or less, what you had to do was not that dissimilar, double negative. It was pretty similar. So we take a scientific approach. We define objective success, choose a starting point, predict the benefits of the change, offer choices to keep the process simple, and we use a simple model for everyone to access. And you can say, well, is everybody doing that? And I would say, actually, no. We choose a starting point based on what works for the organization. We don't have a preset starting point. We give you a bunch of options. That's the choices. But Scrum basically is, here's a framework, use this as is. Schwaber says, Scrum is simple, use it as is. Safe pretty much always starts at the bottom. Again, it's hierarchical thinking. They start with essential safe. Yes, leadership is involved, but you also have it at the bottom with the teams, and you combine the teams together. There's this idea you need to have agile teams to create an agile organization. Well, you know what? You do need to have agile teams to create an agile organization, but it doesn't mean you do them first. Maybe you do it holistically. Actually, I did SAFE once. I used to be a gold partner and SPC trainer and all that. And one of the case studies actually on the SAFE site, I led. It was Northwestern Mutual. And I wrote my own, because actually I did a lot of things a little different, tailored it some, and they didn't write that up. So I wrote my own on it. But the way I did that was, I didn't just individually get the teams. Most of the teams didn't know how to do Scrum. In fact, I think it was only one team out of 125 people with another 125 people in shared services who knew how to do Scrum. But by presenting the whole and then showing how the Scrum teams would work in it, they learned it very quickly. So that's quite different. So Flex is approach. So this is how we do it. Now, I can't go into too much detail. Of course, I've got about 10 more minutes before I get into the questions. I'm running a couple of minutes late, but I'll get it all done. Is we first look at what we call the idealized value stream. Now, this is kind of interesting. Again, we find that most organizations tend to need to do the same thing, but they need to do each of the steps in their own way. In other words, there is portfolio management, there is product management, there's defining an intake process, there's taking it in, there's then actually doing the work. All of these interrelate with each other. How each company does it is going to be a little different, but the objectives, the intentions are quite different. The objectives are the same, but the way you do it is quite different. So what we've done is we've conceptualized the different things. We see the challenges that they're having, because not every company is doing things equally less efficient than they should. So we see, what do you need to do from a conceptual point of view? What are the challenges? What are the actions that you should do? Not here's this framework and do all these things, but what is it that you're doing less effectively than you should? What are those actions? Let's create an improvement backlog on this. So let's actually go through this, because this is the real meat of the matter, is how do we create this improvement backlog? So we have this thing we call engagement pre-planning. We are going to go in, we have lots of chats, do some discovery, and we create this improvement backlog. Preset approaches aren't effective because no one size fits all. So some customization is necessary. While at the same time, we of course need to present the actual, here's what you do type approach. So what we want to do is figure out this pre-planning, work together, and come up with with what's happening. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to start with what we call insights. There are about 36 or so things that we find Agile to do Agile at scale you need to do. I've been mentioning them, portfolio management, proper management of the value stream, work on small things. How do you break things down? How do you integrate? How do you do DevOps, things like that? So we provide these primary ones, and then we see which ones are causing the problems because they're not being done well. And then we delay those that aren't in scope. In other words, we might have 10 things you need to do. One of them might be, what we call agile budgeting and lean funding, but you're not going to be able to get that if you don't have the chief financial officer on your side. So if it's not in scope, what I mean by not in scope is the people who are bringing disciplined Agile in or Flex in, they're not on your side, so to speak. You can't make a change. Or sometimes people aren't ready. Yeah, we could improve, maybe we can improve portfolio management, but before we do that, we have to get people to understand what minimum business increments are. So what we look at is, well, these are 36 things you could potentially do that works pretty much for all organizations, and they're effective when they do these. But we're only going to focus on those that cause the problem. And we're going to not work on those that you can't do because you don't have executive approval or because people aren't ready. So of course, that implies you have to get executive approval. You have to educate people in this. And you're also going to avoid doing things that would cause cognitive overload. In other words, sometimes we find there are like 4 or 5 things that happen to have one development group or one, product management area. So don't do everything there. So what we're doing is we're tailoring a way to start, and we're using what we call minimum viable changes. This came from Jason Little's book, Lean Management. And so what we have done is we take some pre-work. We know what agility is. We know it's in our way. We basically make a tailored approach, or the consultant makes a tailored approach, because people want a solution. There's no question that people want a solution. And you have to also look, we have to look, see how fast to go. So it's up to the consultant to figure it out. They don't figure it out and then say, this is what you do. They work with the people. They know the past, they know the patterns, they have experience, and they work with people because they know their company. And then they figure this all out. And now you have an exact tailor fit for purpose solution for the organization. And we have this improvement backlog, okay? And these MVCs are, like I say, it's like a definition of ready might be, you don't do the whole thing, but you just start saying we have a problem statement, you can add to it. So you do these things in stages, because some companies will go fast and some companies won't want to go fast. They can't go fast. And then you keep improving. This is an interesting observation, that each of the things I've said actually are what you can then use to improve further. Okay, now I'm going to start taking questions, and actually that should say May. We actually have it in pilot and it's working. What I needed to update is the fact that it's not on the website yet. So but it's actually out there and is available. You can send me an email if you want to find where some of them are, because we're offering them actually virtually as well, and in Asia. We've got 7 trainers offering workshops in different time zones around the world. So let me look at these questions, and I'll go back to the front. I realize I should have kind of said this is what differentiates as a summary, but I'll just go through it now a little bit, and there is a page on our website. So one thing that differentiates, one of the biggest differentiators, is the systems thinking approach, which includes looking at it at the whole. It includes incorporating the culture into the organization. So you figure out what's needed, you figure out the pace, you figure out how you're going to do this. This is very much ignored. In fact, I think it's totally ignored by most all the other approaches. How will people adjust to what's going on? And in fact, what you see happening a lot of times in SAFe where they don't adjust to this is, my experience with SAFe and watching other SAFe adoptions is that the first program increment rather is very successful. And then the next one's not quite so successful. And by the third one, it's almost like you're back to where you were, the fourth one. This is a recurring problem. And the question is, why does it happen? And I've had my ideas for a while, but I finally started discussing this on LinkedIn. to get some feedback. Maybe it's just been my experience and not everybody else's. Well, it's a lot of experience, not just mine. I've seen it with many, many cases. But my theory on it has been somewhat now underscored as being accurate. And it's how people react to SAFe. At the beginning, it's like, oh, we're doing something new, management backs off. They allow SAFe to work. We have program increments where they're acting as a pull. I'm getting the system in. But then what happens is people start expecting more and more. So after 2 or 3 program increments, it becomes a push system again. So one of the differences in DA Flex is we create that visibility and give more theory to management and executives, not just what's happening, but why what's happening is happening. Executives actually want this information. They don't want to know about the mechanics so much of the Agile method, but the laws of development, to understand that you push too much on, you slow things down, where they can understand the behavior. That's important. Also, we look to see and talk about, here's what's the business increment you want, not what's the epic you're working on, not what's the feature you want, but what is the difference to the customer? How do MBIs are focused on the customer? So then which market segment? So we can speak in terms of business acumen, so to speak. So that's some of the differences. Then in the middle of it, how do you use, there are other methods besides cross-functional teams. As Ethan mentioned, I was one of the founders of Lean Kanban University. Now it's Kanban University. Actually, ironically, one of the reasons I left was a disagreement between David Anderson and me, is that I felt one of the critical parts of any method is that you look at the what's now called the value creation structure. How are people organized? He said, well, no, that's orthogonal. It's not relevant. It may be relevant, but it's not something you deal with Kanban. So DA attends to that. How do you organize teams? How do you go beyond agile release trains? Agile release trains are great for accommodating the dependencies you have, but we talk about creating focused solution teams. How do I get a small team working on one thing completely where they're autonomous? Okay, so those are some of the differences. Let me go through and see if there are.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Al. I think we are seeing quite a number of Q&A being asked by the audience. And I think
I'm trying to go through that now.
Yes, right. So we are seeing one of the questions that's most.
Yeah, just read it.
Yeah, what's the differences between MVP versus MBI?
Very good. Okay, so a minimum viable product has undergone 3 different definitions in the last 20 years. It started out by Frank Robinson around 2000, 2001. And to his MVP, it was what's basically a small chunk of value that can go out. And it was very consistent with our minimum business increment. But Eric Rees, and I'm not complaining, Eric's redefinition of the MVP was brilliant, and the lean startup. And the MVP was, I have a new product, I have a new service, and I want to validate to see whether or not it actually is a good thing. So I'm going to do the smallest piece I can to validate I have a good idea. Now, normally, this is when you're innovating in a new product. And normally, when you have a new product, you have a team or a group of teams that are focused just on the new product. It makes sense because we're going to build this. We want to accelerate it. We want to get it out the door. So what you have is you're making an investment for innovation. You're making an investment to explore, which is more valuable. You know, am I going in the right direction? Okay, you're starting small, you're expanding. Now, consider what most of you do at scale. You have an existing system. You're adding functionality to the existing system. You probably have a pretty decent idea of what that functionality is and why it's useful. But perhaps more important, it's not a team that has to do it. Anything that team does affects everybody, affects the entire system. Do you get the difference? I mean, it's like in one thing, I'm making a little adjustments across and everybody's interacting. And the other one is I got a small team working on one thing. These are different problems. And to take the same approach for different problems doesn't really make sense. So a minimum business increment is, first of all, defined as the smallest chunk of value that can have value to the customer. And then the question is, well, what's the customer? Well, it might be this subset of customers. These are our really big, best customers. We're going to do something for them. Or here's a really big customer. We're going to do something for them in particular. Or we're going after this geography, or we're using this language, or we're using, these people don't have any tax consequences. So we'll write the software for them first, then we'll add it when they're tax consequences. So we can take a market segment to make it smaller, but it's still going to affect the systems we have that are overall reaching our system. So an MBI not only gives alignment for these multiple groups that have to do it, they enable us to focus on getting the MBI out. So let's compare it to SAFe, because people say, oh, this sounds like Agile and stuff. So I've done SAFe. And one of the issues with SAFe is you have this great big board where you have features and you have stories, and you can add releases, but where is the identifier that says when these features and these stories go out the door, they add value? Not every feature adds value to the customer. I don't know why that seems to be forgotten. Oh, well, some features add value. Yeah, some do, not all. You're building a DVD player, fast forward adds no value to the customer if you don't have reverse. So features, it's usually a combination of features. So when we do program increment planning, that's one way. We can also use flow. So one of the differences is just that. We can do program increment planning. We can do it flow. We can do, some teams are off on their own and they just keep up to date. We can do what works for the organization. Instead of this, I think it's a myth. Let's force people to work in a way that doesn't make sense for them until they learn why it doesn't make sense for them, and then figure out what they need to do, which is basically what that you're saying when you say, let's use this preset thing, and then when people get used to it, they'll get better. We have this way of building a platform, building the program, building the improvement backlog that lets you do what works for you. So in a nutshell, the MBI gives us a chunk of value that we can focus on. What we do if we're using program increment planning is we'll look to see when the MBI, so we have MBIs, features, and stories up on the board. And then when we get them up on the board, we'll say, hey, can we shift these left? Because shifting them left means we're getting them out sooner. We don't do work on features and stories for MBIs that are going off to the right if there's something that can be done sooner to move an MBI. So it's that focus on MBIs. It's a focus on the right size. And it's recognizing that an MBI will be spread across multiple teams. By the way, that then helps us redefine the team structure. That's called value creation structure. So we can get more stable. We can now align the MBIs. Remember, the MBIs are coming out from our products and our services. So by watching how the MBIs come out, seeing how they go to the teams, this gives us the way to align products, the teams to the products. This is something SAFe says to do, but there's no method of doing it. We provide that method through MBIs.
I see. Good to know about that. So I think there's also another follow-up question for this, because I think in MPIs you mentioned about teams and stuff like this, and there's actually another attendee who's actually asking, how do we design our squad in a large organization? Do we map it with the value stream and put people as close by as together in the stream?
Yeah, there are actually many approaches here. First of all, you don't come at it from the squad. You come at it from what does it take to get a series of MBIs done. So one of the techniques that I have found to be incredibly useful is what we call focused solution teams. So think about this for a minute. I'll give you an example. So there was a company I worked with. It was a healthcare company, and they do a lot of data analysis in healthcare, because you've got to see what things are working and what things aren't working. So there's huge data analysis. And what you'd find is when you're building a team like this, that you need a couple of data analysts, but you also need somebody who's familiar with the medical procedures. You need actually some good developers to tie it all together. So there are about 4 or 5 or 6 skills that are required here. And when we came in, some of the things were that you had these different groups. And what would happen is when some requirement came in, they would just assemble a team, get them working. And then, of course, some of these people, though, would be needed for other things, and people working on multiple things. And it wasn't, we didn't align people to this product line. So when I came in, I said, look, you're about to start a new initiative. It's going to spawn whole bunches of things. And we know pretty much what the requirements are for this. We know what skills are, what the capabilities are. So I said, is it possible? Now, I didn't know. I asked. I know what works in the past. I don't know what works here. So this is part of the consultant role. You work with the people. You don't tell them what to do. So I said, is it possible that you could get a group of people that would have all the skills necessary to get this done, would be large enough to get it done at an effective rate that you want? And this is the important question that's often ignored. And by removing them to work on this project, you're not hurting the rest of the organization. I'm going to make a slight aside here. I have seen organizations test out Scrum per se, and they create a cross-functional team and it works magically. Well, of course it does. You have all the people you need. You don't have handoffs, but did you take anybody from the other teams that is now no longer available and is causing problems? See, getting an Agile team to work is not a problem. Getting an Agile team to work without it adversely affecting the rest of the organization, if you have specialized skills, can be a problem. And I wrote something that talks about sometimes successful pilots hurt an organization. I'll make that article available. Anyway, coming back to this first thing, what we did is we say, let's create what we call a focus, meaning this is what we're going to attend to, solution, meaning we're going to be able to build a solution set as these MBIs come in. We're going to build a focused solution team. So what we went through is we went through what are all the skills. Well, we need these analysts, we need those analysts, we need a couple developers, we need a couple of, testers or whatever it was. I don't remember the roles. There were about 5 or 6 roles. And I said, well, how many people do you want working on this? And it was like 14, 15, something like that. Way too big for a single team. So what we do is we say, though, that this whole group is our focused solution team. These people are going to work only on this. I mean, if people have questions at times, that's okay. But mostly this is what they're working on. We made sure they could focus on this. They didn't need to be others. And then we took this team and we organized it into how do they need to work to get MBIs done. Notice where I'm coming from in this. I'm coming from the business need, seeing what are the capabilities, then how do I organize the teams under that context? I'm not coming from, here's my squad, here's my Scrum team, how do I combine them together? This is a completely different kind of design. And by the way, this is not actually unique to disciplined Agile Flex. I learned this from, of all people, Christopher Alexander. My #1 recommended book is from a building architect. Christopher Alexander wrote a book called Timeless Way of Building. And he talks about that you design from the whole and you keep breaking it up and working within the context. It's not the normal decomposition. Systems are about the relationship between the pieces, not the pieces. And it's this holistic approach. See, if you take Scrum teams and combine them, it's about the pieces. If you take the whole and then you say, well, how does this part work with that? You've got these relationships. So anyway, that's how we do this. Now we got a focused solution team. Now they can go off and do on their own. Now, let's say you can't do that all the way because you won't be able to. Then you look at what are the dependencies and like your Agile release strengths. How are they working with each other? Sometimes you'll find I have a component team here that is always working with this team there. Maybe you have somebody who's dedicated. They're still on the component team. We call this borrowed team member. They're still on the component team. But now they have to they will go to the daily stand-ups. They take direction. They're as if they're a part of the other team, even though they're on the component team. So you don't have back and forth integration after 2 weeks. You have it be dynamic. There are many other techniques. There are about 6 techniques that we use. Some of them we made up. Some of them are standard. There are a lot of books in this area. Team topologies, organized for complexity. This is not unknown. But for whatever reason, the existing frameworks tend to ignore this work. We've been, I won't say pioneering it, but we've been somewhat at the forefront of it, and there's a lot there. And please, you can ask me questions. That's why I've got my comments up. I'm going to re-listen to this and find all these things I recommended and put them together with some summary slides as well, comparing MBIs and MVPs.
Yep.
So I can do a few more minutes if there are more questions. I don't think there's anything else after this. And my only problem is I still haven't had coffee yet, but I can last.
Yeah, sure. So one last question before we end this session, El. I think Govin is asking, what's the effective or techniques to identify bottlenecks in the value stream mapping? It's still about the mapping.
What a good question. What a great question. Okay, so here's the easy way to do it is look for waits. Look for people waiting, look for delays in the workflow. I suggested years ago, in fact, it's not in the safe materials now, but years ago, there was a quote by me, maybe it still is there. I suggested something about, I don't know, about 9 years ago. I said, any problem in your process will reflect itself as a delay in your workflow. Okay, I'm gonna say that again. Any problem in your process will reflect itself as a delay in your workflow. In other words, if you don't have proper collaboration, there will be a delay. One team will work on it at one time. It'll be weeks later for the other team. That's a lack of alignment. Challenges in process show up as delays in workflow. So look for delays in workflow. Look for when you're waiting. Look for how slow it is to get feedback. Now, this sounds like really simple. You know what? It actually is really simple. This is one of the other big differences between DA and most of Agile. A lot of Agile talks about complexity here, like, oh, it's so complex. There's no way we can figure this out. It's, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. Well, you know what? There's some truth to that, but there's another way to look at it that we did not come up with. I'd been working toward this for years and years and years. And then I read this book by Ellie Goldratt called The Choice, not the goal. Most everybody knows him for the goal, which is brilliant, but the choice is equally brilliant. And he talks about inherent simplicity. And it was that last couple of inches I couldn't get to, that there are a few things that if you look at, you can understand what's going on in your system, even when the system is complex. In fact, you need to know to look at these things. Now, this doesn't mean you can make total predictability. No, there's micro predictability. Like if I flip a coin, is it going to come up heads or tails? And there's macro predictability. If it's a true coin, 50% of the time, it'll be one or the other. It's the same thing with micro cause and effect, hard to find, macro cause and effect. If I have a lot of delays because people are working on too many things and I look and I see, well, it's because I'm giving them too much work. What's the cause of the delay? People are overloaded, or things are too big, or we don't get good requirements or good priority requirements. So people are changing. That gives us an understanding. And then what we have to do is deal with that. And smaller requirements, smaller pieces to work on, make it easier to get good requirements, because we're really talking about sequencing the work and you have to wait less time. Imagine this. Imagine you go into a store, grocery store, and everybody's got these huge shopping carts.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to wait every time. You're going to wait a half hour to get through the line. You know what? You probably won't go shopping very often, but when you do, you're going to have a huge shopping cart. Now, on the other hand, imagine you go to a place, everybody's got small shopping carts, and you get in the line, you get your stuff quick. You don't mind waiting so much because it's not a long wait. You can focus on the most important things. So look for things like that. I'll make sure I send a list of the factors for simplicity, as we call them, factors for effective value streams. So it gives you the eyes to look at your problem. As the value stream consultant, the way you work with a client is different than the way I've seen others. Clients know more about their company if you're an external consultant than you will ever know, and you need to acknowledge that. But you should have experience that they likely don't have because their business is not consulting. The value stream consulting gives you those insights. So collectively, you say, what's your problem? Here are different solutions. Let's come up with a solution that works for you. That's very definitive, very concrete, because the people in your company want an answer. There's no question they want an answer. Give them an answer, but give them the right answer. It's like going to the doctor. You don't say, oh, my heart hurts me. You say, oh, here's this generic heart medicine I give to everybody. Find out what your problem is, and then it'll give you a specific prescription. And that's what DA does.
I see.
So Al, I think we are about time. I think there are many other great questions that we can't get to answer. But before we close, I really want you to spend a couple of moments to talk about why people should use DA FLEX.
Okay, well, the reason you should use DA FLEX is because it's a way to make you more effective in understanding your problems and how to solve them. And it has you focus on your problems, not focusing on following the framework. See, frameworks are useful as a starting point if you have nothing else. But the fact is, then you start worrying about, oh, we didn't get our sprint done. Oh, we have these carryovers. Oh, we have this and oh, we have that. When you look at the evaluations at the end of SAFe, a lot of it is how did we do according to SAFe? We want to focus on our problems. What we're working on is what we're working on small. Do we have an effective value stream? Now, what differentiates us is you have this dilemma. I alluded to it a minute ago. This dilemma is people want an answer. That's why SAFe is so popular. People want an answer. That's why Scrum is so popular. They give you an answer. but they give you an answer that may or may not be fit for purpose. So what we suggest is you can make fit for purpose solutions. When I say fit for purpose, I mean it's contextualized. You get to choose how you're going to work. Now, the mass teams, they don't want to do this. They want an answer. Most people want an answer. Most executives want an answer. So DA Flex gives you a way to create an answer for your company or the company you're consulting with. So then people say, oh, here's what we're doing. Very specific. I'm doing this, 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 this. But the this, and this were decided on because that's what works at your organization. Now, the idea that you can take a set of practices that somebody else decided works in some situations, start with them, and then figure out what you should do only makes sense if you don't know how to do this up front. Well, I figured out how to do that. Not just me. I've watched people who've done that. I mean, that's the truth is I haven't figured out much of it at all. What I've done is I've watched dozens of amazing consultants, watched how they did it, and then said, okay, we have to make this reasonably simple. The people I watched were brilliant, walk on water type consultants. How does the average person do it? So what we did is we came up with a structure. We came up with these 36 insights. We came up with a way to evaluate it. We came up with a way, these are the orders within which you do it. And I didn't show it on the screen because it's just looks a little complicated, but it's not bad at all. We use Miro boards, virtual whiteboards. So everybody collaborates and creates all these documents I was talking about, all these things I'm talking about. We literally work on them together. And in the end, we walk through, we walk through and show how these are built. And you end up with a backlog, an improvement backlog that you could actually use to make your improvements. So you end up with here, these are the 20 things I got to do, and these are the order I do them in, and who's doing them. And that's one of the big things we have. I was actually going to try to show something, but I'll actually make a little set of slides too that you can see that we literally walk through these things. And that's what we do, is we give you a custom solution that works for you.
Okay, so in short, an Agile practitioner should consider using DA Flex first over other framework when.
Well, here's the thing. I would do it for two things. If you are already using a system, I would learn something about Flex so you could take what is in Flex and apply it to your. I just have it as a webinar. We're considering making it a workshop, but we have what we call the DA Flex playbook for SAFe, which is how you can put MBIs into SAFe, how you can do better program increment planning events, how you can create focused solution teams within SAFe. Excuse me, all of these practices can definitely be done on existing things. We're agnostic. We're not a framework. We're a set of tools and insights that we provide you a way to create your own backlog so you don't have to do that yourself, but this can be applied anywhere. And yeah, I think it's a useful thing. If you're in a company that's committed to doing SAFe, learning Flex is useful because you can take all this good stuff and apply it to the existing situation. Remember, we said you can apply these to where you are. Well, where you are is I'm applying SAFe. Where I am is I'm struggling with Scrum or whatever it is. Take this and lay it on top of what you're doing. So we're not saying, oh, you got to leave what you're doing. No. You start where you are. That's where you are. That's what you need to do. You're already doing program increments, but you jam up after a while because people are throwing too much stuff on you after 3 or 4. Well, how do you stop that? How do you remove the dependencies that are present inside the arts? You know, this is how you can use it if you've already doing something. If you're considering an approach, I definitely would say start learning more about what we have, because if nothing else, you'll learn a huge number of techniques that can be applied anywhere.
Thank you so much, Alan. I think that,
thank you.
Amazing. So to all the participants, so this is the first sessions of 3 sessions of Agile Scale in a session for you. So you are able to tune in to compare and contrast on the 3 different approach, right? Pick and choose which one you want to use. And next week, we're going to have all 3 speakers coming into a single single chat room, and we are going to ask tough questions to this gentleman so that we can explore agile transformation at all 3 schools of thoughts and stuff like that. So you'll be able to tune in, you'll be able to pick and choose, you will be able to see which one makes sense to you the most. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you, Alan, for your great speech. So everybody, please follow CI Agile on LinkedIn, on YouTube as well. We have a lot of videos, and when this recording is ready, we will post it on our YouTube channel, and we will have our LinkedIn post the link and access and stuff like that. So please tune in and see you tomorrow. All right. Thank you, everybody. That is the end of the sessions. Thank you so much. Please feel free to say bye to Alan, and yeah, and that's the end of it. Please come to tune in again tomorrow. We have a great Scrum and Scale, and on the last day we have save, right? Okay.
Great.
So Alan, if you could stay for a few minutes, and
Sure.
that would be fantastic. So that's the end of it. Rachel, do we end these sessions and start another one or something? Or what do you want to do?
Yep, sure. We'll start another session. I'll just send a link by email to Elle.
Okay, so I'm gonna leave and I'll come back.
All right. Thank you and bye-bye. Good night all. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.